applications, and everybody's situation is a little bit unique. And thankfully, we've gotten the government has kind of come together and lightened up some of the restrictions, and we're able to release what's called the Paycheck Program Flexibility Act. And this slide kind of highlights some of those changes that I'll go over with you now. But below here is kind of the brief summary. And the biggest one is the period of time in which you have to spend the money. Originally, it was an 8-week period from the date that you received the loan funds to be able to spend the money, and now that's been extended to 24 weeks as a covered period. So there's so many businesses and so many different industries who originally got PPP loan funds and still weren't open, still didn't have the ability to do business, didn't have the ability to even spend the money to help it, and then thought that I'm just going to have to give this money back because
I just want to clarify that it's the 24 weeks to spend in which you will be forgiven. It's the forgiveness period. It's not the amount of time you have to actually spend the money in total, which is the 5-year term. But I just wanted to clarify that in case that may confuse some.
Thank you, Greg. I appreciate that. Yes, I've been kind of on like autopilot in my brain working through all these, and so please jump in and help me through this as you see fit. Yeah, when it comes, just as Greg said, when it comes to the 8 and the 24 week, the goal is we want as many small businesses as possible to be able to get as close to 100% forgiveness as we can. Any way that we can do that is going to be in the best interest of the business to not have to carry any additional debt from the funds from the Paycheck Protection Program. So being able to open up that window to now have 24 weeks of time to be able to spend the money to where that's eligible for forgiveness is a game changer for a lot of small businesses. And then for loans if you got a PPP loan and it was after June 5th, they changed the term as far as the payback term for any portion of the loan that's not considered forgiven. Instead of a 2-year term, it's now a 5-year term. So that kind of lessens up that monthly payment, even though it's still at the 1% interest rate. It's not such of a short payback term. For applicants that had applied prior to that June 5th interim rule that came out, we're not going back and changing loan agreements for folks who had it to 2 years. Now it goes to 5 years. As of what we know right now, those folks who applied earlier than that and got funding earlier, that will still be on that original term that they had signed and agreed to. In regards to the percentage of funds that must be utilized for payroll, originally that was 75% of the proceeds in order to be for the forgiveness part of the loan needed to be allocated towards payroll costs. That's now been reduced to 60%, which is another kind of flexibility measure that will help hopefully small businesses. The caveat to this piece is that 60% now is in regards to the total loan amount, not just the portion that's being requested for forgiveness. So, you've got a $100,000 loan, 60,000 of that needs to be spent on payroll when you're looking at the forgiveness piece of it, if you want to get as much forgiven as possible. So that's some of the just really high level changes. But what I wanted to share with you specifically is on the Treasury website, the treasury.gov website, which is accessible for anyone to go and get access to. Just 2 days ago, the SBA released a new copy of the application. And there's now what's called an EZ form. And what I want to show you is here that on June 17th, the SBA released new loan forgiveness applications and forms, including an EZ form for certain borrowers. And so if you're on this list, when I show you this EZ form, if you're able to fall into this category, the process to submit your forgiveness request will be much more streamlined and easy to follow. So borrowers who are self-employed, if they're independent contractors or sole proprietors and had no employees at the time of the PPP loan application and did not include any employee salaries, or borrowers that did not reduce the salaries or wages of their employees by more than 25% during the covered period between January 1st and March 31st, or borrowers that experienced reductions in business activity as a result of health directives related to COVID-19 and did not reduce the salary or wages of their employees by more than 25%, can be eligible to complete this Paycheck Protection Program application form 3508EZ. And if you look at this form, I mean, it's really, really simple. I mean, just basic information that you'll be completing on page 1, as far as, you know, your SBA loan number, the loan amount that you got, the date that you got the money, how many employees you put that you had on your application, how many employees that you have at the time that you've asked for forgiveness. Did you get an EIDL advance amount? What was that application number? Which covered period are you requesting? You'll list your itemized expenses on line 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then you'll make some certifications on page 2 here, and then a signature. Most lenders will have this in a digital format. So you'll want to contact your lender directly to see and ask them about what their forgiveness process is going to look like. At KeyBank, we'll have a portal that we'll be emailing to all of our PPP loan applicants, and we're going to do it in waves. For the earliest applicants who applied in the very beginning, they'll get an application from us and an assigned banker who will kind of help them throughout the whole process to make sure that they have their documentation in place. But there's a corresponding document, and it's the loan forgiveness application instructions for borrowers, which is also on the treasury.gov website, and it will walk you line by line. And so this will be a really good exercise to do for your business once you've exhausted and spent the PPP funds, and you're looking at completing your loan forgiveness application. This is a great tool to kind of use the paper form, use the website at treasury.gov to complete it, and then contact your lender and ask what their process will be, and you'll have most of your information, and you'll have gone through the process yourself to feel comfortable with whatever the portal or whatever means in which they want to get that forgiveness application from you. In addition, a lot of people have asked, well, what type of documentation do I need to provide when it comes to loan forgiveness? What you have to remember is that the loan forgiveness is determined by the lender in which you applied with. And so you'll want to contact your lender directly to see what documentation that they're requiring. On our website, key.com/paycheck protection, under forgiveness, we have each category listed there and then corresponding documentation that we'd want to see for each eligible category, whether you're submitting for mortgage obligations, rent obligations, utility payments, or payroll. On the right-hand side here, you'll see documentation that needs to be submitted. And now with having more time to spend the money for forgiveness, a lot of businesses are saying, gosh, it's going to be easier documentation-wise just to try and spend all the money if possible on payroll. And then that'll limit how much documentation that we'll have to submit for the forgiveness piece. That's not going to be the case and not going to work necessarily for every business. But for those that it does apply to, it could be easier than having to gather lease agreements and bank statements and copies of canceled checks and et cetera for other related expenses that are eligible uses that you can get forgiven. Some are just choosing to do payroll.
Dylan, I think another thing on the new forgiveness that might be worth mentioning is the extension in terms of when you can hire your employees back that is now out to the end of December, correct?
Yeah, December 31st. It used to be, it was June 30th was like, okay, you got to restore your FTE level by June 30th. Now you've got till the end of the year. So, a lot of borrowers in the beginning were operating under the rules that we knew at that time. And so there was kind of specific plans in place to spend that money within the 8 weeks, check all the boxes to make sure that we could get 100% forgiven. And the good news for those folks is that they can still continue under that plan. And there's a forgiveness application available as long as they've restored, that FTE back in place to where that they don't have to necessarily wait till the end of the year or wait for the full 24 weeks before they submit their forgiveness application. But for other folks, where if your business is in a place where you haven't been able to restore that full FTE level, just to Greg's point, now being able to have till the end of the year, it can be a game changer. So that's an excellent point. The one other thing that I want to mention that's really important is, a lot of lenders have had a really, really hard time, managing just the capacity constraints on trying to do as many applications as possible, be able to fund as many applications as possible, and then gearing up to get ready to help small businesses with their forgiveness application process as well. And with all of that was kind of going on at the same time, several lenders either closed their application portals for new PPP loan applications, but several of them have now opened them back up because we've got this ticking time clock that's going to end at the end of the month. So we really want to make sure that that people here, if you have not applied for a PPP loan yet, there is still money available. I think last week there was still close to 100 billion available, in fact. And so we're seeing a lot more sole proprietors, independent contractors, a lot of people who originally thought, well, maybe the PPP loan doesn't apply to me. I don't have employees. It's just me. Please know that this PPP loan application does apply to you, even if you're a sole proprietor or self-employed or an independent contractor. So contact your lender, see if they have their application. Here at KeyBank, we have our application portal still open. We're probably going to put our cutoff time on June 25th, so about 6 more days, because we want to give ourselves enough time to get an SBA number through the E-Tran system prior to them closing that off on June 30th. And maybe you've already applied for a PPP loan, but if there's someone in your community, if there's someone who you do business with, who you've talked to and they haven't yet, make sure that they reach out to their lender and apply, because there's still money on the table to be given out under this program. So take advantage of it. What I would recommend everybody to do next is to make sure you visit the treasury.gov website, get familiar with the new forgiveness application forms, go through the instruction for borrowers and the easy form yourself for your own business to kind of do a test. Contact your lender directly and ask them what their process will be for loan forgiveness, so that you get into the queue and you're part of that pipeline. And the other big part to mention is that once your PPP loan forgiveness application is submitted to your lender for forgiveness, the lender has 60 days to make a decision on the forgiveness approval. Within that 60-day time period, once they approve whatever forgivable amount that is deemed approved, the lender or the bank or whoever you applied with the PPP loan through will then send that to the SBA for approval. The SBA, when they receive it from the lender, then has up to 90 days to review and approve the lender's approval, and then to issue the funds directly from the SBA, the forgiveness funds, back to the lender. And the lender at that time would apply those forgiveness funds to the borrower's loan directly. And if that was 100% forgiven, the loan could essentially go away. And then whatever the difference would be, if it was only a portion forgiven, then the rest of that balance would then go on the terms that you had signed when you originally got your PPP loan, which for a lot of folks will be a 2-year term, a 1% interest rate with that monthly payment that was on your paperwork. So just know 60 days with the lender, 90 days with the SBA, that's 5 months. So that's not, I mean, this isn't happening overnight. And there's a lot of processing that's work that's going to go into this. So the more organized that you can be, the more ready to go that you can be on the front end. I want as many small businesses as possible to get their forgiveness application completed as soon as possible, just so they can, there's something about having that weight over your shoulders of not knowing, is it forgiven, is it not forgiven, how much are we going to do, so you can continue to run your business. But again, having the 24-week flexibility now with the loan forgiveness piece is huge. Those were the major points that I just wanted to share and make sure that everybody had their resources to. Hopefully, Kate at the Chamber, we can have links to the treasury.gov website, and then also leveraging our SBDC, the Small Business Development Center, with Greg and his team. They've been such amazing partners, from the Chamber to the Small Business Development Center, and just resources in our community to help navigate through all these programs. One thing you'll notice on the application too for the forgiveness is if you got an EIDL advance amount, you will list that there, and that will be deducted from the amount that's forgiven. So just remember that. A lot of people got advances, and a lot of people, as Kate mentioned on the front end of this call, that a lot are hearing back now to be able to apply for much larger, the 30-year fixed rate, 3.75 interest rate EIDL loans. So if you get that email, make sure to take advantage of that program too. And with that, Greg, I might turn it over to you to kind of get your feedback from what you're hearing from the EIDL program, and then also with the Paycheck Protection Program, and any other comments that you have for the group.
Sure. As you mentioned, the EIDL is open again, and it is open for all applicants, farmers, small business, self-employed, you name it. We don't know how much money is left in that pot. From what I've been told by the SBA, they do have enough funding to process the loans that were applied for previously, which is why they reopened it. But there's still a lot of those applications that are still pending, that haven't been processed. So basically the short of it is apply as soon as you can, because we still don't know how briefly it's going to be open for applications. The hope is from the SBA side is, now that they have caught up a little bit from the original phases of accepting applications into that program, that they should process these a little quicker. So they're hoping to be around 3 to 4 weeks, but we still don't know. I know that there's a lot of folks out there who are still having difficulty in completing their application. There's a number of clients that we have that have gotten messages back that their loan has been stalled or denied or whatever for lack of information or for whatever reason. And I know that's been a really difficult process for people in terms of knowing what the SBA is asking of them. So just make sure that you are when when they are reaching out to you, it'll be in an email asking you to create your online portal and register. So that's not a scam email, and you'll be getting it from the SBA. And so you will have to go in, create an account, log in, and complete the rest of your application and whatever additional information they might need. So make sure that you're not overlooking that, because if you don't complete that process, your loan will just stay pending and you only have 60 days and then it's closed and you will have to reapply. So with the PPP, it's been a case by case in terms of who's still accepting apps. I'm glad to hear KeyBank is. I actually just talked to Tony and I suggested Square because I know a lot of clients that have been using Square, which really kind of surprised a number of us at how easy and quickly they process those applications. But apparently they have closed their applications. But he if you don't mind me sharing, Tony, he applied through Bluevine and said that was a really simplified and streamlined process. So remember, you don't have to necessarily apply through your lending institution. It certainly can be simpler, that you don't have to go through the process of verifying your business account and your personal identity and setting all of that up. But if they are no longer accepting applications, or for whatever reason you aren't able to move forward with them, you can certainly go over to another bank or these non-traditional sources like Bluevine, PayPal, and now community development financial institutions are able to process PPP loans as well. And kind of tangentially, Mid-Columbia Economic Development District has gotten some economic development funds to where they can provide some loans as well. Eric is asking a question. Do you accrue interest on the EIDL loan during the waive period for payments to the EIDL? You do not. So you have a 12-month deferral, and that is on principal and interest. But that is not the same with the PPP. And Dylan, you can correct me if I'm wrong, you have a 6-month deferral, but interest accrues on origination.
Correct. Yes. Yep. You're accruing interest from the date that you get the money.
Yeah.
And when you complete your forgiveness application, if whatever that forgiven portion amount ends up being, then the corresponding interest for that portion is also forgiven. But whatever that other remaining balance is, it will be accruing interest since you got the money deposited into your bank account. And but remember, it's 1%.
And also keep in mind, the same rules apply if you were going after both funding sources, in that if you're getting the EIDL, it needs to, you can't be spending that money on payroll if you're going to be getting the PPP as well, unless you want to refinance that into the PPP, and that is certainly not recommended. And also the EIDL, of course, can't be used for long-term debt. You can't use it to consolidate other loans. So we're recommending, and Dylan, I'd be interested to hear if you share the same opinion, is that when if you're going to get both of these funding sources, keep separate accounts. It's not necessary, but it really makes things easier in terms of tracking your expenses and reporting moving forward. And I believe you have to make sure you maintain those records for 6 years after you receive your loans. as terms for that funding.
Yeah, and what I would add to that is that do what works best for you. There's a lot of bookkeepers that help assist businesses, and they have a certain method of operation. And if a lot of times separate accounts has been the most streamlined, easy way for tracking use of funds through a separate bank account. Other clients that it's if they're an independent contractor and it's just them and they've got a system in place and they don't want to hassle with another bank account and can manage it under one, the bank, it's not a requirement from the lender that they're checking how many bank accounts that you have or which ones they've been deposited into. It's more of that you have the supporting documentation and the record keeping on how those were spent. And to Greg's point, that's a lot easier to tell that story when it was all into one account and all came out of that same account. So that's definitely a good best practice for sure.
Great. Well, and additionally, so Karen's asking, she applied for the EIDL loan and only got $1,000. And I just want to make sure, Karen, that that $1,000 wasn't just the advance, because if it was, when you apply, you have the option of being eligible for an advance, and that will be $1,000 if you are a sole proprietor, self-employed, or just have one employee. And that money will just show up in your bank, and you'll have no, it's in essence a grant. That is separate from the loan. If you were approved for that EIDL loan at just $1,000, which that seems to be what you think has happened, and certainly could, you can potentially discuss that with your SBA loan officer. You will have to wait until that SBA loan officer reaches out to you. The SBA has no channel for you to reach out to an SBA loan officer and talk to them about your specific loan until they contact you and have assigned you an SBA loan officer. So it can be really frustrating, because even if you call their hotline and you have your confirmation number, they often can't get you much information about your loan. And if they do, it's pretty general and they can't really help you move it forward. So you often have to wait just for that SBA loan officer to contact you. And yes, you can potentially get more from your loan, but it's not going to be based on how much you lost. The general way that they are calculating how much you get in those loans is by your income. And so they'll look at your income over the last 12 months, and you'll roughly get about half of that, unless for whatever reason, due to credit or your debt to income, they feel you'll have no chance of servicing that debt, and then it might be lower than that.
Go ahead.
The only other thing I was going to say is that if you have the ability, you're 500 employees or less, you're an independent contractor, you're a sole proprietor, pretty much however you're organized, even as a nonprofit 501c3, if you haven't applied for the PPP loan yet, do that. This is your stimulus money from the government. So make sure to, and the clock is ticking. We've got, 6 to 11 days left before you do that. And then for the EIDL loan, a 30-year fixed rate at 3.75%. You can't, with really no loan fee, you can't get really cheaper commercial money than that. And given these unprecedented times and, the environment that we're in, having access to capital, cash is king. And just, I'm encouraging folks to leverage these programs because they're designed and in place to really help support you. You can always pay it back.
Yeah, and that's the great thing is there's that 12 months deferral and no pre-payoff penalty. So I've been advising clients, ask for and take as much as they'll give you, and you can put that in your bank account. And if you don't need it, great, you can pay it back in 12 months. And if you do need it, you have it.
I want to get to these questions. There's a lot. I'll start at the top. And Doug, I'm not sure, you were talking about the PPP. For Safe Harbor now being 12/31, what date are they looking to for full-time employee restoration if you are a seasonal business? Date of loan or February 2020?
There is on the PPP loan, remember this is 2 days old, updated guidance from the SBA. On the borrower instruction form, there's a specific formula that you can scroll to where it talks about your covered period, your alternative payroll covered period, and if you're a seasonal employee. So I would, each individual's business is going to be unique and different, and I would take that question. I'd have to research it a little bit more to answer that specifically, but I would advise, check with your lender and review the borrower instruction form with the new PPP loan forgiveness form that just came out.
Okay. Judy asked, how does the EIDL advancement amount affect the forgiveness application, etc.? I thought the EIDL advancement was part of the EIDL loan, not PPP. Confused. What if you are taking out an EIDL loan?
So I think the question, well, you're right. They're separate. They're completely independent. The way that they do interact is if you get an advance or that grant portion, whatever that amount is, $1,000 to $10,000, that amount will be deducted from the total amount that you are forgiven on your PPP. Like Dylan showed you on that easy application, there's a spot there that says EIDL advance, and you have to put that money, however much you received, in there. And so, if you got $10,000 from that and you had $60,000 in a PPP and all of it was forgiven, well, 10,000 of it won't be, and you'll have to assume that debt.
Okay.
You think that answered the question, Kate?
Judy says yes.
Oh, great.
Okay, it's from Miko. To make sure you are maintaining staff to be able to use the EZ form, what number do you want to use? Average monthly gross payroll for 2019 or for January through March 31st? Or do you want to go by numbers of hours worked during those periods? Miko?
I'm going to read this. It says, borrowers that did not reduce the salary or wages of their employees by more than 20% during the covered period, and their covered period is either the 8 weeks from when they received the funds or the new 24 weeks option, compared to January 1st, 2020 and March 31st, 2020, and did not reduce the number of hours of their employees between January 1st, 2020 and the end of the covered period. So that's also available on the treasury.gov website under their FAQ section, that you can kind of go to that formula, and we'll be able to kind of answer that question for your own specific business, along with the borrower instruction form as well.
Another thing to keep an eye out for, and I'll make sure Kate has this, and as well as Dylan, and it'll be put out there, but the Capital Access team is putting together a PPP loan forgiveness preparation activity. And basically it's a exercise or checklist that you can go through that will help you prepare for your forgiveness application. That's something that's going to go live within a week or so. And that could really help you, and because it goes literally step by step of your application, both the easy and the more difficult long form, that can really help you get prepared in applying for that. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Hey, Greg, go ahead.
The only other thing I was going to say to that too is check with your lender who you applied with your PPP loan through as well, because, for example, for clients that applied with KeyBank, in our forgiveness portal, we're releasing the portal starting July 6th. And so borrowers will get a chance to get that application into their hands directly from where they applied from. And it's kind of the same thing that Greg described. It's this, you know, you'll be able to go through this easy portal and answer all the questions specific to your business to kind of get a feel of, before having to submit it back to the bank, you can actually save it. You can partially fill it out. You can see all the required pieces of information that you need to gather. It's not like you're under the gun and only have 24 hours to do it once you get it. You'll have time to really review it and fill it out and complete it before submitting it.
Okay, please clarify. Do you accrue interest on the EIDL loan during the waived period for payments to the EIDL?
We answered that one.
Okay. Tony says Blue Vine approved my loan already. I applied Wednesday. Awesome. Judy, I accepted a loan amount for the EIDL. It asked for bank deposit info. Then it had a signed document section. Then the website froze. Will they contact me? I was number 187 on hold on phone. Not sure what to do next.
Yeah, that's, I'm sorry, Judy. I can't imagine how frustrating that is. And what if you are able to, is to go back in and start that process over, because that's happened to a number of people. And if you're able to, I would assume that it has not proceeded. And if you can go back and process it again, hopefully they will reach back out to you if there's an issue. But those are really your only options. I mean, you have 3 options. Again, go through and try to reprocess it. Wait for your SBA loan officer to get a hold of you, or reach out to them through their hotline, which I know really is frustrating. And they do have an email hotline as well. So you can try the email hotline, give them your reference number, and I mean, you might as well just put that out there and see if that gets anywhere as well.
Okay, let's see. Karen had a second part to hers. How can I increase that offer? As it is almost insulting, given I lost over 40K in business to date. This was for an EIDL grant application submitted 3/31/20. No, in advance I got approved for the IK loan.
Right. We were talking about that, and you can talk with your SBA loan officer when they reach out to you to finalize your loan and discuss that and ask them why was this the amount chosen? What can I do to increase that amount if anything possible? You can go back and check on your status of your account if you have your login and password information. But yeah, if it hasn't already been finalized and received, then you still have an option to ask for more money. Whether you get it or not, I don't know. But if the loan's been finalized and you've received that $1,000, then it's closed. Meaning you're not going to be able to ask for more at this point.
Jenny, can you spend the EIDL grant advance on anything, or does it also specify that the EIDL grant advance must be spent on non-payroll expenses?
So the grant, one, it has to be on your business, can't be for personal use, cannot be for long-term debt, and you can use it for payroll, but again, it's still considered part of the EIDL loan, even though you don't have to pay it off. So I would not advise you spending it on payroll if you are going to get a PPP. If you don't have a PPP, then yeah, you can spend it on payroll. But if you do, I would advise you to not spend it on payroll.
The SBA has a really great little definition to answer that question too, on what can I spend my EIDL loan money on. And it says like 6 or 7 things. It says working capital, payroll, accounts payable, inventory, rent, and debt payments. but it cannot be used to pay off or refinance debt. So that's kind of, that sums up what Greg just said.
Okay, so if you laid off employees for a time, then you can use the easy form.
Say that first part again.
If you laid off employees for a time, can you use the easy form?
I think everybody in America laid off their employees for a time. Yeah, that's not necessarily the piece. It's more of have you restored them by the end of your covered period that you're choosing, whether it's the 8 weeks or the 24 weeks. And if you have, then you would be eligible to use the easy form.
Okay. This is from Philip. They automatically gave me the EIDL $1,000 grant advance along with my $2,500 PPP loan. I only have $2,500 total that I can use for payroll. So I have to pay back the $1,000 EIDL grant advance. Apparently, I cannot use it on any expenses since I work from home. Not even a phone bill? Question mark.
Unfortunately, yeah, that's kind of, yeah, that's really unfortunate that if you did get that grant, it is going to go against, you know, whatever you're forgiven, which will be that $2,400. So ultimately you only get $1,400 forgiven, and that other $1,000 will just be debt in your PPP. But you can use that grant for other operating expenses, regardless of whether you're working at home. You can use it on rent, or use it on your utilities, use it on anything that you need to operate your business, use it on whatever expenses you need to, you know, support your organization. So it's pretty flexible in that respect.
Do you know what the hotline email address is?
I can find it for you.
Okay. So if someone gets the EIDL advancement but never applies for PPP or EIDL loan, then they get to keep it?
Say that again.
If someone gets the EIDL advancement but never applies for the PPP or the EIDL loan, then they get to keep it?
Yeah, that's your money. There's no obligation. You don't need to take the loan. If you get the grant and that's all you want, then it's all yours. You still do need to technically use it for the same terms applied to the EIDL loan, and you should still be prepared to report on it. The likelihood of you being required to report on it are about 0, but still make sure that you are tracking those expenses and using it for your business.
Okay, if you maintain the payroll at the required level for 8 weeks, then in the fall, if employees leave and you go down in your payroll, can you still get the PPP forgiven? Or do you have to maintain the level of period after the 8 weeks?
Well, if you are electing for your covered period for your PPP loan just to be the 8 weeks, and you'll submit your forgiveness application based off of that 8-week period, then what happens after that time is no longer related to or applicable to your PPP loan. And that's what a lot of business kind of built plans around, was that 8-week period. So you still have the option. I've got a couple of clients that have said, you know, we've created our plan. We're going to spend the money as we intended to. We're going to get as much of it forgiven. We've been able to kind of keep our staff for this covered period, this 8-week time, but we don't know if we can sustain that model for the rest of the year. So, you know, make sure you elect your covered period to be during that time where you spent it as the program was set to be, which can be that 8-week time period. And then if you have to make other business decisions later on that might relate to reducing staff, you would have met the requirements for that covered period.
Okay. All right. There is the email. I grossed $16K in 2019, but my net was only $3,400. The SBA told me I didn't qualify for the EIDL grant because I didn't sustain enough injury. where does it say what the income requirements are on the SBA site, or does it anywhere?
It doesn't. And the terms for which they determine, or the calculations they use to determine economic injury, is not public knowledge. I don't know exactly what they are. It is something that they apply throughout all of their economic injury disaster loans. And so, just so people know, the EIDL program has been around for decades. It's not just this COVID EIDL or the CARES Act. The CARES Act certainly put funding into it, but the SBA uses this EIDL loan for a number of different disasters, from floods, most commonly for droughts. So just recently, like Kate knows, that their SBA announced for this region the EIDL for a drought in March through April that you can now apply for. The terms are the same for all of these loans. The underwriting process is the same. And generally what they do is they look at the terms for which the disaster occurs. So in this case, March, April maybe, or depending on when you apply, and they'll take that same time period and look at your last year at the same time period and compare the two. And so if you had significantly more income in the same quarter last year, then they could justify that you've had an economic injury. If you are, for whatever reason, doing better during that same time period, even though you may be sustaining injury in some other manner, it's going to be deemed that you aren't eligible because you're not suffering economic disaster, economic injury. So I know that's frustrating, but there's no clear details in terms of it has to be X amount of loss or a certain percentage.
I have an email from somebody on the call with a lot of questions, so I'm going to ask them. Can any of the payroll taxes be paid out of the PPP loan funds, like Medicare, federal withholding, Oregon state taxes, etc.?
So what we know about that is that the employee's portion, so for example, you have an employee that grosses $1,000 through a pay period, that full $1,000 can be used. And then the FICA portion for the employer of that, in addition to that, is not a covered payroll cost. But the state portion could be, because it's not FICA related. So hopefully that answers the question. But the employer portion of FICA is not included in payroll costs.
Yeah, it's not that amount that they are withholding for the employee. That is not eligible.
Okay, we might have answered this, but I'm going to read it. Do we need to decide at the 2-month mark if we want to proceed with the forgiveness application? And if we decide to wait, do we have to wait till the end of the 24 months, or can it be forgiven at any time during that 24-month period once the money is gone?
Yeah, this question kind of came up in our town hall that we had within the bank, and the way it's being interpreted now, there's more SBA guidance that's going to be coming out for the loan forgiveness process. So this could change, but as we were reading it, assuming that you've exhausted your PPP money and you've elected your covered period to be that 24-week time, you don't necessarily have to wait until the end of that covered period for us to accept the forgiveness application. Again, until more guidance is given from the SBA, as of right now, that's how we're interpreting that. They can either choose the covered period to be the 8 weeks and go with the forgiveness application at that point. If they determine that the 24-week covered period is a better choice for them and wants to apply after the funds have been exhausted, that could be an option. But that you would want to check directly with your lender who's processing your forgiveness application to see how they're processing those.
Okay, can you pay your employees a thank you bonus for working through COVID to help spend the 75% portion of the payroll if you're needing to spend some of the funds?
Yes, cash equivalents do qualify. Remember, they don't have to be that 75% number anymore. We're only required to be at the 60%. But as long as you're not paying the employee more than 100,000 annualized, when that's prorated on a weekly basis, they just can't be compensated more than annualized at 100,000. That's their cap. But if you want to do a cash bonus, I mean, some employers were trying to retain employees instead of having them go on unemployment. They were doing $600 bonuses weekly just to keep them on the job versus taking, and that's an eligible payroll cost that can be used towards the PPP funds.
Okay. Questions for the EIDL loan. We have been approved for the loan through the SBA directly, but we have not received any money for the grant portion that we understood to be $1,000 an employee. If we accept the loan, will we jeopardize receiving the grant money?
Not necessarily. When you talk to your SBA loan officer, you can bring that up, but you aren't guaranteed to get that loan or that advance, that grant. And whether they decide to give it to you or not, I don't know what determination they're using. To me, it would seem like, anybody who asks for it should get it until they run out of funding. But that doesn't seem to be the case. I applied for one and I didn't get the advance. So you can ask your SBA loan officer, but that's all you can do. And there's just no guarantee that you will get it. Once you have received the loan, then yeah, it's an advance. So once you have your loan, you don't get the advance.
Could we have completed something incorrectly on the original application? I heard there was a check box
Yes.
that had to be checked. Maybe we missed that.
Yeah, that's correct. In the third iteration of their online applications, which was the streamlined easy app, the portal, that was literally 3 or 4 pages that you could fill out in 5 minutes. At the very end of that, there was a checkbox that says, do you want to be considered for an advance? And it doesn't say anything about a grant or anything more than that. It says up to a $10,000 advance. And if you did not check that box, then you will not be considered for it.
If we take the EIDL loan, can we use it to cover payroll once the money from the PP loan is spent? Or do we have to file for forgiveness first and have the PPP loan finished before we can use the EIDL loan to cover new payroll costs?
And Dylan, I don't know if you have insight on this. It's my understanding, and please take that disclaimer, as I am not the ultimate authority, and I have not seen this in writing from the SBA or the U.S. Department of Treasury, is that once your PPP funding is exhausted, then yes, you can use that EIDL money for payroll, because there's no loan for you to refinance it into the PPP. It's gone. But if you still have debt associated with that PPP, or as long as you do have debt associated with it, you cannot use it for payroll.
Yeah, that's how we're interpreting it as well, Greg. And on the forgiveness application,
We lost you, Dylan. You're frozen.
the forgiveness portion,
Yeah.
and that's.
Can you repeat that, Dylan?
We lost you for a minute, Dylan.
Oh, sorry about that. Can you
You're
Can you hear me now?
frozen. You're frozen, but we can hear you.
Oh, that's okay. I'm sorry about that.
It's
Internet on the heights isn't as well. On that forgiveness application, all we care about is what that advance amount was, because that portion will be deducted from the forgiveness amount. That's what the lender's looking at. That's what we're kind of auditing against. And so to Greg's point, once those funds have been exhausted and you've got remaining EIDL loan amount available, you can start using that for payroll costs.
Okay, if we accept the full idle loan amount and only end up using a portion of it, can we repay the unused portion and have our loan amount calculated on that new amount actually borrowed?
I'm not too sure if I get the question entirely, but if for the idle, and this is the same for the PPP, although I don't see why you'd want to do this with the PPP, you can pay down that loan at any time. It's not going to be reassessed or reevaluated, and there would be no reason for it to be. Your principal would be bought down, and so you would not be paying interest on any more than that. So the answer is yes, I'm pretty sure, if I'm getting that question correctly.
The only thing,
Go ahead.
the only thing I would add to that is just to kind of echo Greg's comment is that, you know, for the PPP loans, we're not going to be re-amortizing those. So if, for example, you got a $10,000 PPP loan, you got $7,500 forgiven, you've got a $2,500 balance, your payment that's due is the original payment based off of the full $10,000 in the beginning. We're not going to be like, oh, now you only owe $2,500, so now your monthly payment's a lot smaller for another 2 years. It's going to be what was the original payment on the full amount, and then after that deferral period ends, that'll be the monthly payment that will need to be paid.
And remember, the terms on the idle are a 30-year loan, so your payments are going to be pretty small.
Okay, do you expect more technical corrections to forgiveness? Example, 60% payroll originally was a cliff, now it is not. The forgiveness application has changed. Is it best to wait and not get too caught up in this, since with the new 24-week, the covered period extends to October for April loans?
I mean,
I would just say for me, that's kind of an easy yes. Don't get too caught up. You know, we just got this updated application 2 days ago, and how many versions of the application have we received since it all started? So, I mean, we want to give everybody as much information as is available when we know it, but as you've seen and experienced, it's fluid and changing. So just maintain a close relationship with your lender who you received the PPP loan for, or the fintech or whoever you applied with, just so you know and understand what their process is going to look like, because they're really going to be the ones that will work with you to make sure that you get as much forgiveness as possible under the new rules.
And to add to that, there very well may be new technical changes. We don't know. Keep in mind that the changes that were added recently were legislated in terms of the Forgiveness Act, and that's no minor thing. I do not foresee any new legislative changes, so anything that significant altering, but minor changes to the application process or other things certainly could happen.
Okay, so just to clarify, I work from home and don't pay a mortgage, etc., but I can use the idle grant portion to pay for utilities such as electric and phone based on 2.5 months worth of those expenses.
I think you're getting some things mixed up there. I don't know what the 2.5 months has nothing to do with the idle. That's based on the PPP. So I don't know which one we're referring to. The idle, as long as you can justify it as a business expense, then yes. So like if you're a home-based business and you've been writing off those expenses historically as business expenses, then you can justify it. If you haven't and you want to just now because you have this money, maybe not a good idea. But you certainly can use it. I'm not too sure how the 2.5 months plays with the idle, or if you meant the PPP, I don't know.
Philip, do you want to unmute and clarify, or are you good to go? I guess he's good to go.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Sorry.
Hi.
We're talking just about the idle. So I guess you can deduct a year's worth of expenses, not just 2.5 months.
No, you're using that money as those expenses occur. So, you're paying off those expenses presently. You don't go backwards with it.
Okay.
So again, you have quite a lot of time with that money, a year of deferment, and it's a 30-year term. So you can use that money for a long time, but it's for current operating expenses.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. That's it. Anybody
I
else?
guess I do want to clarify, you can use it for the short-term debt if you have any. So like if you're using a credit card or something for business operations, that's an acceptable expense for the idle.
Okay. No more questions? Last call for questions.
I have
There's
a
lots of
question.
Go ahead.
What you just commented about the credit card. If you had a balance on the credit card before coming into this mess, and you use that money to pay some of that balance of that credit card, I'm sure there's probably some way we can juggle funds around our monthly expenses, but I would really like to pay off a credit card with that idle loan.
Yeah, and
Trying to figure out how to do it.
Yeah, because you have that, you've incurred the debt a while ago, but you're actually incurring the expense at the time you pay it off. So you can, and and just kind of between us here, it's maybe, and I think I used this term with, maybe it was Tony, kind of some accounting shenanigans, but you can always use the idle money for whatever business expenses you normally would be generating, and the money that you're saving from not using that with your own capital, you can use that to buy down your debt.
Perfect.
As long as you're showing that the money you've gotten from the idle can be correlated and directly, expensed towards your business. And if there's $10,000 you're not spending out of your own money, great, use that to buy down your debt.
Okay, that's what I was hoping. Thank you.
Once you accept the idle loan and sign papers, how long does it take to get the money?
That there's unfortunately no clear answer. Usually once you have signed the papers and approved, it's usually about a week.
Yeah, I have my bookkeeper, Judy, has done this idle for about 25 clients, and she said that she's seen it mostly within 3 business days. Okay. Anything else? Last call for questions, or you guys feel free to reach out to me afterwards if you think of something, and then I can try to get an answer from you, from Dylan or Greg anytime. Please reach out to me for that. And then Greg, I had a question that I thought of. So this is really complicated stuff. It's really confusing. Is there assistance? Does the SBDC give assistance for people that are trying to walk through this process? Can they reach out to you guys for that, just assistance?
I'm glad you asked, and this is probably important also to clarify for Dylan moving forward. The SBDC has taken the stance that we are not going to complete an application with our clients. And the reason being is that if there was a mistake made, or we, for whatever reason, they aren't forgiven on a certain portion, that can make us liable. And so the stance we're taking is preparing them to apply. And that might be, a little gray, but so we can walk through it and help you kind of get some of the information you need or answer questions. But to actually go through and apply with you is kind of just one step a little farther for us in terms of our own liability as an organization and as individual advisors. So, so yes, we'll support you, but we have to kind of be careful there.
Okay.
And that same disclaimer you'll hear from your lender and from your bank too is that, you know, the number one rule is we don't give legal advice and we don't give tax advice. But a lot of PPP loan clients are leveraging their CPAs and their tax advisors to really help advise on the process. There's a lot of CPAs that have applied on behalf of their clients for them as well. So if you don't have a current tax advisor or CPA, that they are a valuable resource to have as you're navigating through some of these uncharted waters. If you don't have one, that's another resource that you could reach out to as your tax advisor.
Yeah, and if you guys need some tax advisor, hit me up. That's what membership is for, and I can hook you up with some really great. I have a bookkeeper right now that is literally saving my life.
Can you send me some referrals?
Yeah.
Yeah. I have a number of clients in Hood River that have been asking.
Yeah, absolutely. We would love to do that. That's what chambers do. Okay. All right, guys. Happy Friday. Enjoy this beautiful weekend. Appreciate you guys all being here. Please reach out to us if you have questions. We will be updating what we know when we know it as fast as we can, or the SBA also is doing lots of calls. So make sure that you're on their mailing list to receive what they're doing. I am, and they're doing all kinds of stuff. So make sure that you are doing that, and please, you know, hang in there. We're all in this together, and have a great weekend.
Thank you, Kate.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kate.
Thanks, guys.
Bye, Greg.